So once you got all of your pattern pieces cut out, you can see mine here. I've got my front, my back. I've got the binding for the neck, the arms, and the inseam. I've got the piece of fabric for my template, as well as the pieces that I'm going to use for my ruffles. So let's get started. I'm going to actually start with doing getting my ruffles and the template piece ready. So I'm going to be doing them on the back of the fabric. I'm going to be doing them on the back of the romper. So I've got this here. I know I want my butterfly kind of high up. I would maybe like it a little bit larger, but it'll be fine. It'll be cute. She's a tiny little girl. I have a tiny little daughter. Make sure my grain line is matchy-matchy. Okay. Okay. You can feel where everything is. Instead of sewing around the paper template piece like they say to do in the instructions, I'm actually going to do a little bit of pinning, not a lot. I'm going to be careful when I do it because I don't want to tear a small hole or something in my fabric. And then I'm going to take actually my blue water soluble marker and just trace around my butterfly. I like to make my little girl awfully girly. It's because I've got two little boys. So if I can make it girly, better believe I'm gonna do it. Okay. So I've got that traced on there and ready to go. And before I stitch the ruffles on, I'm actually going to do a zigzag stitch along one of the hems, and it's going to kind of give it more of a ruffly look. After that, we're going to go ahead and do a basting stitch along the other side so that we can cinch it up and before we attach it, ruffle it up a bit. So let's get started on that. So after you have your pattern pieces cut out, ready to go, and you've got your template piece pinned on, before you actually sew anything on the pattern, it's best to take some of the scraps from the fabric you cut out earlier and run some test stitches on it. So if you have a machine where you've got some stretch stitches that you're going to be using, or if you don't have any stretch stitches and you're going to be using a zigzag, this is the perfect time to test it out and be sure that you've got all of your settings correct before you actually sew your project. So I'm doing a just a basic straight stretch stitch. And I'm going to pull on it and stretch it a little bit and just kind of see how it looks and if it's going wonky anywhere, and it doesn't look like it is. And I'm going to go ahead and do one other stitch, at least one other stitch as well. On my machine I have a seam and overcast stretch stitch, which is what I like to do for my seams for when I'm sewing it together, because I don't have a serger. So I'm going to go ahead and go along with that just to make sure. because the knit fabric that you're using will vary a lot. The last romper that I did for my daughter was using a very lightweight knit, whereas right now the bacon and eggs is interlock, so it's quite a bit thicker. So, and I like the way that that's going. Could maybe tighten the tension up a bit, but I will adjust that when I go to do it. So I'm happy with that for now, and I'm gonna go ahead and start sewing the butterfly onto the back of my romper, and I'm gonna go ahead and use that straight stretch stitch that I just did. Make sure that my bottom thread is out of the way, and good to go. Regardless of the template that you choose to do, go slowly. If you have to unpick any of this, it is a nightmare. I ended up having to unpick one of the butterflies on my last romper, and it's not fun. So go slowly, and you'll get through it just fine. All the while making sure that as you're moving the fabric around, it stays flat, and that none of your piece of fabric's getting folded under and sewn where it shouldn't be sewn. I'm going to go over my start point a couple times. Okay. And there we go. So, and go along and trim the excess that is on the back side. I like to use my little stork scissors for that. Be very, very careful when you're going around your sewn-on template piece. When you're trimming off the excess, or when you're cutting the top fabric out to show the pop of color through. Again, go slowly. You don't want to accidentally stick the end of your scissors through the top layer of fabric and end up with a hole where you don't want it. So there that is, all cut out. I'm going to leave my top piece intact until closer to the end, simply because I don't like to mess with my main piece of fabric too much until I know that everything's situated on there correctly. So now I'm going to go ahead, because I'm doing ruffles, I'm going to go ahead and ruffle it up a bit. Okay, so I've got my ruffles all roughly. Now I just want to make sure that I get them where I want them. So, all right, so I've got my first ruffle set up here, and I've got my sew line kind of marked here. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do, take that off. I'm actually going to go ahead and throw a pin in here. Just one. Okay. Okay. And I'm going to be doing my straight stretch stitch on this. Okay. Try and keep it moderately straight. I've got my ruffles on. They look pretty good. I'm happy with it. Nice good stretch. And so the next thing that we're going to be doing, we're going to continue on with the pattern as it's written in the book. Because I have strayed quite a bit. So let's get our bindings. So that's what we're going to head for next.